Peace be upon you. Welcome to Rational Religion. We're going to be having a look at Joe Rogan quoting Jordan Peterson on some life advice and seeing whether we should follow it. Let's have a look.
Weak is thought of as a virtue. Jordan Peterson has a really interesting way of looking at this, and he said it to me once, and it made a lot of sense. He said, people think that you should be weak and you should be docile, and then you should be a pacifist. He goes, no, you should be a monster. He said, you should be a monster, you should be ruthlessly ambitious, and then learn how to control it. And it's that old expression, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. It's an old expression, but it makes sense, because it doesn't mean that you can't be kind if you're strong, but it does mean you can't be strong if you're weak. And there's a lot of weak people in this country right now that are trying to take control.
So initial reactions.
Initial reaction is that, so the reason I put this on our group for what we want to respond to is because it
sums up a moral philosophy.
It sums up the moral philosophy of the West very nicely, which is that, so people don't understand, but a lot of the culture that we have today, a lot of it stems from, centuries of belief. And in fact, millennia of belief, and that religion that exists, it permeates into society and then molds the national character of people.
Cultural values.
The cultural values, so that even when they discard the religion, they are left with the cultural values that are distilled from that religious concept of God. And this is so interesting because he begins by talking in this video about people say, you should be docile, pacifist, kind, right?
Yeah, be kind.
Be kind, but actually, you should be a monster who learns to be kind, because it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah,
right. So, in other words, you need to have, what they're basically saying there is that you need to have both aspects of a character. You need to have the aspect of severity and punishment and power and authority, and you need the aspect of gentleness, forgiving, kind, loving. And you need to be a balance of both to be a complete human being. That's basically what Joe Rogan is saying.
Yeah, via Jordan Peterson via Rogan.
Jordan Peterson via Joe Rogan, right? Yeah. And the funny thing is, well, what do you make of that? I know I think you get it where I'm getting to. Last page of Philosophy, the Teachings of Islam is where I'm getting to.
Well, I was going to say that the Islamic conception of morals is that you should no moral virtue or no moral impulse is necessarily good or evil. It's about how you use it and where you use it. So you should be harsh when harshness is demanded by the situation. You should be forgiving and gentle when gentleness is demanded by the situation. There's obviously the famous verse of the Quran where it says, you should the punishment for a crime is an injury the like thereof, but forgiveness is better if it leads to reformation. Yeah. So you have to figure out what is the appropriate moral to demonstrate here in reference to what I want to achieve. So Islam, unlike Christianity...
in reference to what God wants me to achieve, actually.
That's true, yeah. In reference to what
otherwise you're just a psychopath.
Otherwise you're just efficient.
What should I do? What should I do here? I'll go on.
If what you want to achieve, if you are a believer and you want God's, the outcomes that God has given you.
Yeah.
So that is contrary to the Gospel's kind of emphasis on pure gentleness, where it's all about turn the other cheek. It's all about, forgiveness and nothing but kind of kindness and compassion. And that may have been appropriate because the Jewish people they seem to have gone so far down the harshness principle
at the time of Jesus,
when Jesus appeared 2,000 years ago, that they needed someone to counterbalance that.
Yes.
So that they came back to the middle.
Yes.
So that they came back to a sense of, I will be harsh when I should be harsh, and I'll be kind and forgiving when I should be kind and forgiving. Jesus needed to emphasize one end of the spectrum because they were on the other side of the spectrum. And the Quran is one which in one teaching encapsulates the whole thing. It tells you to be in the middle. It tells you that you have to have both sides of the spectrum, but channel them according to whatever, to the situation, right? And it also speaks to me, this whole philosophy, which is that the Quran, unlike other religions, especially Christianity, doesn't tell you to kill your desires outright. It says that you should channel them in the right way. So monasticism is not a thing and celibacy is not a thing in Islam.
It's explicitly prohibited.
It's completely prohibited. It's un-Islamic. It's something which will earn the displeasure of God, because you are destroying a faculty which God has given you, and it's a rank ungratefulness and gratitude to God. What Islam, but then Islam doesn't say, well, then just be a Lothario and, have complete sexual permissiveness. It says, exercise your faculties within the four walls of the Sharia. Scary word. It just means the moral law, the spiritual one's moral law of God's teaching.
Yeah.
So it's, Islam is this beautiful kind of middle way, right? And it's a teaching which it's so clearly from the creator of mankind, because it understands all of our faculties, and it understands that we want to exercise them, but it guides you to exercise them in the right way. It's so balanced. Even if you read the Quran, if you read long tracts of it, it's so balanced in the way that at times it'll emphasize God's harshness and his punishment, but it'll always then talk about God's forgiveness, and it's this kind of constant balancing act, if you will, with a slightly more side of kind of forgiving and mercy, obviously. But it's this beautiful kind of middle line. In Islam, one of the meanings of Sirat al-Mustaqim, which is the path,
that we pray for.
Yeah, the path that Muslims pray to be led down, the straight path, is that it is the middle path, the middle way.
Yeah, and I've got a verse of the Quran which relates to that, chapter 2, verse 144, 143, if you don't include Bismillah as the first verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا لتكونوا. And thus have we made you, it's translated here as an exalted nation, but the word wasata, right, جعلناكم أمة وسطا لتكونوا, it means the middle nation.
Right, yeah.
Right? So it signifies that we have made you a nation of the middle.
Yeah, of balance.
And so this is a wonderful particular verse of the Quran, because people accuse the Quran and Islam of being a religion of extreme.
Yeah.
And God particularly here says is that actually we made you to be a moderate nation, which is balanced between the forces of harshness and tenderness, jalal and jamal in Islamic terminology. And, I think that, you summed it up really nicely, which is that Islam teaches that you should exercise, that there is that every single one of your faculties is blessed, including punishment, including harshness, including anger,
Yeah.
right? All of these things have value. That's why God gave them to you.
Yeah.
Right? But they become ugly when they're exercised in the wrong context. And so the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, he emphasized that what is wisdom? He was asked, what is wisdom? And he summed it up so perfectly in such a small number of words. He said, wisdom is to place a thing in its correct location.
Yeah.
That's all the wisdom is.
Right time, right place.
Right time, right place. So, wisdom is to exercise anger when anger is appropriate for the sake of God on important matters which are not to do with your personal ego.
Yeah.
Right? Forgiveness is appropriate when it will lead to reformation, as the Quran says. Punishment is appropriate when punishment will lead to reformation. Forgiveness will not. And just as punishment when forgiveness is appropriate is wrong, forgiveness when punishment is appropriate is wrong as well.
Yeah.
Right? So this ultimately, in my view, stems from your perception of God. The Christians perceived God as a weak man who was beaten and flogged and put on a cross and died and was impotent and said, oh Lord, forgive them who persecute me, and they say, oh, he forgave his oppressors. Well, okay, he forgave his oppressors. Let's say he forgave his oppressors, but he was in a position of total weakness. To forgive at a point when you can't exact punishment, it's just a meaningless phrase.
Yeah.
No, I forgive you. Oh, really? You forgive us, do you? As you're lying on the cross. Oh, you're forgiving us. Forgiveness is when you have complete authority over someone and then you forgive them. And that's exactly what the Prophet Muhammad did. Yeah. When he conquered Mecca with 10,000, an army of 10,000, and he had all of his enemies in his grasp under his hand, he could have had all of them rounded up and executed in a moment. And you know what? Nobody would have really batted an eyelid. Right, because of the injustices that had been performed upon him and his family. Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, she cut open the liver of the Prophet Muhammad's uncle on the battlefield of Uhud and ate his liver. She cannibalized him on the battlefield, and he forgave her. He forgave the man who murdered his pregnant daughter, pushed her off a camel, caused her to miscarry, died later as a result of the miscarriage.
Yeah.
So, and he forgave him, Habbar, that was his name. So, Islam exercises forgiveness when it was appropriate, and it does, and it exercises punishment when it's appropriate. But the Christian conception of the kindness and impotence and turning the other cheek and weakness is actually the virtue.
Yeah.
Comes directly from their conception of God, because they personified God as a weak man. Right? And this is what, in the last chapter of Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, may Allah send down blessings upon him and peace upon him, he wrote in this amazing book, Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, the last chapter, he talks about how those who conceive of God as only having the attributes of gentleness and forbearance and forgiveness, and deny the attributes of God of punishment and wrath and justice, that they ultimately do not understand who God is. They've misrepresented God. And the consequence is this. You look at a Joe Rogan clip, you're like, oh, cool, flick, next video. It's got a profound religious history stretching over eons as to what he's feeling there.
And I also wonder that, what is being said here, the kind of Jordan Peterson philosophy, and now even the red pill stuff, is a kind of backlash to the weakness and the kind of emasculate, what's the phrase? Emasculation? No.
Yeah. Yeah,
whatever.
Emasculation, correct, yeah.
Of that is current in Western society, where everything is feminized, in the sense of there is an overemphasis on the typical feminine qualities of gentleness and forgiveness and these kind of softness,
acceptance,
and softness, and then you're kind of having this kind of quite and in some respects you could say, I would say, over masculine backlash to it, because everyone's trying to find the middle ground, and they're being pulled super this way, and then it's like, no, we need to go all the way this way, and it's teach you to be the uber
macho,
the super macho guy who's able to get all the girls, etc. And what they're really trying to get to is the middle path, and I think this would be a critic. Although I think that Peterson's advice here demonstrates a moral philosophy which we would accord with, in a sense. I
wouldn't have called the ambition and ruthlessness. No,
well, this is he's trying to get to that, but he doesn't really quite know what he's trying to get to. But that's kind of the sentiment. He's getting in the right direction, but the way he's talking about it is wrong. But to become a monster, then control yourself, fails to understand what the idea of a monster is.
Yeah,
a monster is out of control.
Yeah.
So to try and seek to inculcate in yourself ruthlessness, anger, and essentially being out of control is the path to ruin. You should never try and do that. You should never say, I'm going to become something that is demonic.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to control myself. It reminds me, I know this is a bit of a tangent, it reminds me of Marx in in the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels, in this hilarious
poor Engels. He always gets missed out.
I know, right? I'm
never be second author. You've got to be first author. Otherwise, nobody's going to remember you.
It's unbelievably frustrating that this philosophy took over the world for so long. When you read the manifesto, it's so ridiculous, because basically the whole idea is we are going to get you to small autonomous kind of communities that can just exist by themselves in a self-governing way in a nice and local little local cooperatives. And the way you need to get there is you create massive international and if not national behemoths of total centralized power. So become totally centralized. In fact, basically kill your ruling classes, take all the hands of the economic power and political power into your hands, and at some point, if you could transition to local autonomous self-governing cooperatives, that'd be fantastic. It's like, funnily enough, they never got to that. They stopped at massive, behemoth of centralized political power.
Yeah.
You have to have, there was no gateway to getting to what they wanted.
Like, Marx, I understand that you want to get there, but you're here. Now tell me, how are the people who killed everybody to obtain complete and absolute power going to then give it up
Exactly.
to the autonomous local commune pacifist vegan farmers.
And it demonstrates the same misunderstanding of human nature, which is that you continue to exercise the qualities which you inculcate in yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
If you put yourself down one path, you can't be like, well, I want to go there, so we're going that way. That's not how it works. So if you try and make yourself a monster, you're going to end up a monster.
So what you're saying is that Jordan Peterson is actually Marxist.
Jordan Peterson's a Marxist. You heard it here first.
I mean, and on that bombshell.
No, we should correct.
No,
Jordan Peterson is making a similar mistake with respect to human nature that Marx made.
Yeah, but that's extraordinary.
One could say a Marxist mistake.
That's extraordinary given how much he hates Marxism.
Yeah. I mean, it's ironic, but it demonstrates a failure to understand human nature, which is that you should seek from the outset to go down the middle path. You should have the self-awareness to figure out where you are. Are you too angry or are you too soft?
I think I'm too soft.
I've always thought that about you. I look at you and I think this guy's too gentle. He needs to man up. You need to know where you are, and then you can figure out kind of how do you get to the middle. Actually, weirdly, I found this with medicine and in my job, and I don't know if other people have the same thing in their jobs. I slightly oddly, I found that the way I naturally worked, actually, it's probably not that odd, is that I was basically very anxious. I was very, very self-aware and self-critical of, am I doing things in the right way? Are there going to be bad consequences about the way that I work? And actually the way, especially in my early medical career, was I was ruled too much by anxiety to the point where in a specific medical sense of accountability and all these things, and I'd be working very late to make sure I had, all the I's and dotted all the I's, crossed the T's.
Yeah. Made
sure everything was done so that I couldn't, I've done everything. Like no one can say he hasn't done the work, and that inevitably leads to burnout. And it's actually not the right way to do things. But that was the side of the spectrum that I was on. But I also noticed doctors that were so cavalier that they didn't do any of that. And I initially thought, wow, I wish I could be like this guy. This guy he must be amazing, because he just seems to he just carries on. He must have amazing judgment of like what you need to do and what you don't do. And then you later see those guys make big mistakes.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the self-awareness to know what side of the spectrum they were on. And had they had that, then they can move towards the middle. Someone like me, and there are many doctors like me who on the other side, more on that side. Yeah. Have you had that self-awareness, then you're at least able to consciously bring yourself more towards the middle.
Yeah.
And I guess you can generalize that to kind of where you are in general in your moral life.
Yeah.
And what direction you need to work towards. But what you shouldn't do is say, well, wherever I am, I'm going to make myself at one extreme and then bring myself back, because you're never going to bring yourself back.
You're never going to get there.
Yeah. And can I just say lastly, sorry, I would say lastly, I find it ironic, this idea of it's a great quote that kind of, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
I agree with that.
I do, in a sense though. Who makes the peace?
Yeah,
it'll be the gardeners. So the war will end from the gardeners.
Yeah,
not from the warriors.
Yeah. It's a very good point. And it's something that we're seeing play out in the world today with Russia and Ukraine, actually.
Yeah, well, with Joseph Borrell and the Europe is a garden.
Yeah, Europe is a garden. You don't have any gardeners.
Yeah, clearly.
Guess what happens?
Too many warriors.
Guess what happens with the garden which doesn't have gardeners?
Yes.
Weeds.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And do make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.